Hello and welcome to your weekly briefing for Global Conflict 1. This video will be covering days 81 to 87 and, as usual, attempting to document the various political changes that have occurred within that time frame. So the big news, I think, is this week that a coalition against House 19 have launched a major offensive against them. As we can see right here, there has been a major push by both House 2 and House 17 into central Russia. And they've managed to flip two counties right there. If we look down over here at China, House 6 is pushed in there. In southeast China, we have House 17. They flipped that county over. House 12 sort of made a resurgence here in central east China, retaking that from House 19. Over here in North India, we have this county was flipped from House 15 to House 10, which once again calls into question what exactly the relationship between those two houses is, considering their past history. They have had very high rates of tension between them before, and there was a player who is in a fairly prominent position who said that once again the tensions are escalating between the two of them. So if we have had a county flip by House 10 from House 15, that might be a signal of something to come. I mean, if we look at how the glory race is panning out, House 15 is making some major gains, so they might be considered the next threat, either them or House 10. And this is because House 9 has sort of publicly declared that they are currently not affiliated with any house. Yeah, what you have going on with that is House 9 sort of bowing out of the former ties to House 15 and House 18, which is somewhat interesting, but as I pointed out in a couple of other episodes, it is really somewhat silly to have a house that is considered a sister house that is not actually participating in the war effort. In addition to that major offensive, and this news right here might be a little bit old, but both Poland and Ukraine were flipped from House 19 to House 10, and I think that was a little bit older than especially this most recent stuff that happened up here in Central Russia. But yeah, there has been a major offensive against House 19, especially from last week when we saw them pushing over here into Canada, and really they're pushing also pretty hard into China. We'd seen some fairly decent progress considering the almost insurmountable alliance that was aligned against them. That really hasn't panned out, as we can see over here in northern, or just Alaska. They control just a couple of parishes yet. They do have a few parishes here in southwest Canada, but they don't really seem to be doing anything remarkable with that push. It seems to have largely stalled, I imagine, as the pressure is being placed on their homeland a little bit more. And when it comes to Ireland over here, we saw this flipped to House 2, all but Northern Ireland, that was formerly held by House 19 last week. When it comes to covering House 1, now there is currently nothing left that they really hold, but they made a public statement that their entire purpose in this game is to cause or be a thorn in the side of House 15 and House 18. So obviously, they're not in it to win it, so to speak. They're just in it for the lulz. If we look over here at Japan, we can see that it has been flipped to House 17 from House 16. And interestingly enough, if we back all the way off, we can see that although House 17 and their alliance controls the majority of land, and their House 2 is actually the one who holds the kingship there. So that might be indicative of things to come if House 2, because they do have allies right here in House 12 in China right there. So, they're in the area already. Could they be setting themselves up for a more suitable position once House 19 maybe agrees to some terms of surrender? I don't know if House 19 will agree to terms of surrender or not. But if they keep pushing, if the alliance, the coalition against House 19 keeps pushing like we saw this week, House 19 definitely has a good fight on its hands, and I don't think the coalition against them is going to break until House 19 breaks. So it might be in House 19's best interest to go ahead and sort of make peace with all these other houses, so that those houses can start fighting amongst themselves, and House 19 can sort of just step out of the spotlight for a little bit. That might be in their best interest. I don't know if that's going to happen, but yeah, the progress that was made by a coalition against House 19 in this past 7 days is pretty much unparalleled for the last month. It has really been a slow month overall, and yeah, I was quite surprised. Even as I was doing these notes, you know, all of a sudden I saw counties flipping, and I didn't even have it written down. So this is pretty much just off the top of my head right now. I really didn't have any notes prepared for any of that. Well, one additional thing that I should have noted here, or made note of here, is that Portugal has since been flipped back to House 10 from House 19. That's not all that unsurprising, considering the sort of the results, or the heavy fighting. That's interesting, because it's really not fighting. Most of the time it just has to do with a lot of politics cards and monks being spammed. But at the same time, I would say it is a definite, they launched a heavy offensive against them, so it's not unsurprising that House 19 would be pushed out of Portugal, which they controlled last week. When it comes to covering smaller houses, like I mentioned, House 1, they don't control any land. House 3 is in a similar boat. Their single formerly remaining county has been flipped to House 17 from House 3. So House 3 doesn't actually control any counties, I don't think, on the map anymore. That is the interesting thing about the Global Conflict map, is for me it's a bit hard to distinguish between what is a province and what is a country sometimes. Right, so all that big news aside, I think I need to go ahead and cover the various alliances once again, because there has been a couple of small changes, and also for people who might be new to the series, they might not be aware of what alliances are currently formed, and it is rather inconvenient to just have to tell them to go and watch a previous episode. As usual, starting with House 2 in Canada, we have House 2, sister houses of House 6, House 7, House 12, a little bit there in Germany, and as well as in China, and whatever is left of House 3, although that might not be for long. Moving down to House 15 in the United States of America and Central America, we have in that alliance House 15, House 18, and House 4, who used to be a former alliance member of House 17 until they split off from them in an attempt to negotiate a peace between themselves and House 19, which ultimately failed, and now they're fighting in House 15. House 10 in South America. They are sister houses with House 11 and the pretty much defunct House 14, which doesn't control anything that I know of on the map. And the final over here in the land down under, we have House 17 with sister houses of House 16 and House 20. This is against House 19, their alliance of House 19, House 8, House 5, which is blue, but they don't really control much of anything anymore. Their county apparently got taken away from them. And House 13. House 9 is no longer a part of the House 15 alliance. They're currently farming on their own, probably rebuilding what they can after that spectacular war between them and House 19, which they ultimately lost. And there is the potential that House 10 also has House 9 in its sights. If we take a look at possible conflicts post House 19, House 10 versus House 15 and House 10 versus House 9 are both very potential conflicts that could happen. And of course, I already covered House 1. They are also fighting by themselves, but they are fighting against the House 15 alliance. Yeah, so as always, I do look forward to hearing from you. If you have any news within the game world, you can mail me. My in-game name is David Spy. That is one word. I do read all the mails that I get, and I try to respond to most of them. But yeah, I'm looking for more information, especially about non-geographical happenings. For example, if there have been various important changes in leadership, would be important to note, and it is something that I just can't easily filter out, as opposed to actually looking over the geography of the map and pointing out the various changes compared to last week. It would require a lot more effort, and as you know, time is a limited resource for most of us. So it all comes down to that. If you would like to see, a little bit more information, as always, I welcome you, like I said, to get in contact with me in game. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next week.
Stronghold Kingdoms. What will you fight for? Play now for free.